Next presenter is going to be Abukar Arman. Abukar Arman is a writer, a political analyst, and Somalia's envoy to the United States. And also, he's very active in the community and very active in the Muslim community as well. Please welcome Abukar.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah. I greet each one of you with the greetings of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I'm grateful to the speaker who was before me, Sherry Andes. She covered at least she laid the groundwork, if you will, for the next topic, the topic that I would like to touch on, which is leadership, in essence. She talked about community organizing at the community level, and she talked about the importance of leadership. So I want to open with this remark by saying there are three generally types of leadership, not the styles, but in general, those whom we call leaders. There are those who come to a system that is in existence, and they maintain that system. And they become effective leader in the process. And there are those who come to a system that's in place, whether it is an organization, a community, or anything like that, and they reform it. And then there is a third category who are what I would call the transformational leaders. Leaders who would come to a place where there is no system. And they have to build everything from ground up. And that's the topic of discussion for the next few minutes that I was allowed to speak, or the next half an hour, I should say. So I will try to cover that and then entertain few questions, hopefully. So by transformation, what does to transform something mean? In general, I think I gave you a hint in my opening remark, but in general, what comes to your mind when we talk about transformational leadership in our current situation, for example? Whether it is at the community level or country level or family level even. What comes to mind? Yes?
It could be that maybe you were a leader before, but now you've changed more into getting more knowledge and you transferred to better leadership.
You are taking it to the next level. Good. Now, who comes to mind as individuals, for example, when we talk about transformational leadership? Individually, who comes to mind? Can you think of an individual who fits in that kind of description? Youth, okay, they can be, of course. They can be, if they go through the process of becoming one. Yes, yes. Right. Either way, yeah, historical or contemporary or anyone.
The biggest one I can think of is the transformed the whole Arabia from virtual existence to the dominance in their history.
Right.
That's a great example.
Right. And thank you. That is one example of an individual, and there are many others, right? There are many others. We can think of in this country, for example, Susan B. Anthony, right? Right? Who is Susan B. Anthony? Anyone? Yes? Transformed the concept of voting rights, right? When it was male exclusive, and now it became universal, that women can vote, right? So is that a transformational leader? Of course. How about Abraham Lincoln? Yeah? How about Moses? Sayyidina Musa, alayhi salatu wasalam. We mentioned Sayyidina Muhammad. And figures like that transformed the way people think. And then they left impression behind. You know, what's unique about these individuals are individuals who come with a vision. And their vision is much broader than the narrow vision that an average leader would have. An average leader might be thinking about how to take my company's or advance my company's interests, for example. You know, and he or she would be limited in that framework. Whereas a transformational leader would be much broader in their thinking and in their scope. And I'll give you some of the criteria or some of the attributes of a transformational leader. Then they train individuals who become the successors. They train them to carry that message. So their message, long after they're gone, it continues. That's why we mention these historical figures today in this gathering. Years later, centuries later, in some cases millennia later. So we're mentioning them because the values that they left behind are that important. And the values are oftentimes universal values. Values that you and I can take it and take it to a different situation because it transcends time and space and conditions and everything. You can take them and apply them anywhere, and it works the same. People of different languages, people of different cultures. You take the same system and apply it, and it works equally the same. So that's the difference between the average leader and the transformational leader. So keep that in mind as we progress, as I cover some of these attributes of the transformational leader, and then we'll, as I said, I'll entertain some of the questions. So they are persistent individuals who are focused on positive change. They want to do something positive, something good. They take societies like the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu, and it was mentioned as the first example, taking people from the state of ignorance into a state of enlightenment, in understanding what it is to be a human being and to be part of living with others. And what responsibility do you have as an individual towards your God, towards yourself, towards your family, towards your community, and then society, and so forth and so on. So in every aspect of the person's existence, not just one area, because there are a lot of people who excel in certain areas. And you can find many examples of that. But you will not find a whole lot of people throughout the human history who would excel in every area that they attempt. You know? So in other words, they can be just person in one setting. For example, a person can be a just human being who practices justice when he or she is dealing with people of his faith, for example. You know. And then in that context, he or she is clear as to how he should render justice. But when it comes to others, much broader setting, then that individual would be violating and thinks that he or she is doing the right thing. So that's a narrow-visioned leader. Leader within that small context, but not leader, a transformational leader in the big context. So there is some difference between their way of thinking. So we said that the person would have a broader vision and not a narrow vision. We covered that. And then the person would have a strategic plan on how to accomplish that. And a lot of them do have that strategic plan. A lot of the managers, a lot of the leaders, a lot of family leaders would have a strategic plan of some sort. But to understand that it takes a process to develop certain or to train certain and followers, if you will, to borrow the word from Sherry earlier. It takes a process. It takes a germination process, right? You plant that little seed and you wait for it, for that process to take place and then to emerge out of the ground and then in due course become that big tree that bears fruits. So that person is patient with that process. That person understands that it's not going to happen just like that. You want to train people. You want to help them to become leaders. You want to instill in them values that are worth and, or values that can change societies, can change individuals, and so forth and so on. It takes a process. So we have to be patient with that. And earlier it was mentioned that the relational meetings that should take place between people, right? Oftentimes that's where relationships break. You know, theoretically everybody understands what they need to do. But when you take it to the application level and you take it to the ground, only few survive. Only few have that patience. They have a profound trust. People trust them a whole lot. You know, I'll use the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ as an example. When he first received the first wahy or first inspiration, and when he was to confront his people to deliver that message, one of the things that he said when he asked people to gather was, or one of the statements that he made was, that الرائد لا يكذب على أهله or على قومه. That the person who is sent to do what the Somalis call sahan, you know, like when people are in a nomadic society, what they do is, if they want to move from point A to point B, they send somebody to explore the territory, the new territory. Are there any hostile people there? Is it really land worthy of moving to, for example? And that person who performs the sahan has to have certain qualities. You can't just send anybody and say, hey, by the way, why don't you just go to the next village or next territory and check for us if it is worthy? Because now you're risking the whole people. They're moving from point A to point B. If there is a group that's hostile to this particular tribe or a particular group of people or community, that the whole community is at risk. So the person who does that has certain qualities. And these are qualities that are based on trust. That individual has to be a trustworthy individual. You can't just send anybody. Because that person might take a shortcut and might bring you news that will endanger everybody. So trust, profound trust. And the person has to be led by selfless motives. See, even in leadership, you will find a group of people that function within that setting, within that system, but are driven by what I would describe, for lack of better word, selfish intentions. Meaning I want to become that executive, that top figure within the company. So I'll be performing good, and I'll become a good leader because it has its own rewards. It has both its intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. So therefore, I have a motivation to do that, to become a good leader. So still, at the end of the day, I have a selfish motive to do that. Transformational leaders don't have selfish motive to do that, because they could be ending up losing in the process as individuals and win as a community or as a society. That's why the individuals that we talked about, some of them had to go through a lot of suffering. And oftentimes in their initial stage, people don't even believe them. People don't even think it's doable what they're talking about. They don't believe them until they see some results. And then when they see the results, everyone tends to join them. You know, because everybody loves success, right? Success has 1,000 fathers, they say, and failure is a what? An orphan, right? No one wants to claim failure. But success, everyone wants to say, hey, I was there. I was part of this. I believe in the same causes or the same values. I have the same values as such and such. So they are centered, they are anchored by God consciousness or a divine motive. You know, that the person has always something that's driving them that's bigger than what the average person sees. A bigger cause. That's why he or she can do without the rewards that come with successes. They don't want to see it right now. They don't have to see the result of it right away. And oftentimes they understand the value of delayed gratification. You know, I don't have to collect everything right now. So there will be a time when the results would show. When these individuals would be mentioned as we are mentioned, history would remember them, if not for anything else. The values that they left behind will be something that each person inherits and takes it as one of their own. They have a profound knowledge base about the environment that they are in, the conditions, socially, politically, economically. They have a wider view than the average leader would. That helps them in their decision making. Because if you really don't understand everything that's surrounding you, all the challenges that you're facing or the society is facing, how can you make certain decisions? You can't. They understand also group dynamics. And they understand what's called ethics of disagreement. Very critical. You bring people together. You don't have a guarantee that they will all work together. They could be individually the most effective individuals. But once you bring them together, chemistry takes toll on people. You will see people who are grown-ups, who are individually otherwise decent human beings, and now look at each other like, I cannot work with this person, I cannot work with that person. Some would tell you, and those are much better than the ones that would not tell you. At least the ones that tell you, you would know how to deal with them. The ones that don't tell you, who would act negatively because they're working with certain individuals, are too many. And that's what hinders progress within companies, within communities, within societies, within nations, and so forth and so on. So the ethics of disagreement, which means, in essence, you can disagree with a person, but you don't have to transgress against the person. And there are certain limitations on how you address these issues there are boundaries, I should say, on how you address, and when do you address, and where do you address these issues of disagreement. Because in some cases, if you just confront a person in public on issues of disagreement, that would just might get you a negative reaction, for example. Just to give you one example. So where, when, and how, all of that matters in disagreements. So the person who's a transformational leader is a mindful person of all of these dynamics. You know. And the transformational leader has a certain quality that oftentimes leaders don't have. They're gentle in their approach, and they're humble. Why is that necessary? Why is that necessary? To be gentle and to be humble. Yes?
Because you don't, so that it prevents you from trying to force your opinion and your opinion on someone else. Rather, you need to let them understand in their own time what your views are and how it could relate to whatever you're trying to solve or trying to.
Very good. Very good. Yes?
Also, if you are gentle
approachable. Absolutely. Absolutely. All of these. And what it does is one other thing, which is it diffuses the ego. There is no competition. In other words, that leader understands that I don't have to put you down in order to teach you something or to show you the best way to do what you need to do, for example, or to recruit that person. So they are gentle in that sense. So there would not be ego competition in that with the leader versus the followers and so forth, which most of the times happens within companies most of the time. These leaders always lead by example. They won't teach something that they themselves don't do, which oftentimes people make that mistake and assume that others cannot read it through. Especially when it is people that you work with day in, day out, who can literally see you, or you're part of that community and you're one of their leaders. And what you're preaching is not really what you practice. That becomes transparent after a while. People can always tell who is the genuine person versus who is the fake person. And then they practice self-examination or introspection. They're very introspective people. After every event, they go back and reanalyze what they have done, what others said. Did I listen to that individual's grievance? Did I address it accordingly? What am I going to do about it next time? How can I do it better the next time? And so forth and so on. So only an introspective individual can literally have those inventories revisited each time, in order to correct it, in order to improve it, and so forth. They're problem solvers and critical thinkers. There are a lot of leaders who are like that. We know. But these ones would do it even if it costs them their reputation and dignity. They're willing to take the punches for a bigger cause. And that's different than the other individual who would solve the problem with you or without you, because that's the management style. So in other words, I'll try to solve the problem. If it does not work, then you're out. So because my word prevails over you. Now these people are not in that business. They're in the business of saving the individual, earning and recruiting that individual and earning their respect, basically. So these, I'll stop here because in the interest of time to allow questions. This transformational leadership that we talked about, it can be used at the micro level and also at the macro level. And I think we need to think about that for a minute. Because earlier, as the speaker before me surveyed, we talked about community divisions, for example. How the organizations are still struggling to form unity, how the community itself is struggling with that. We talked about all of this. So someone who is a transformational leader, and these leaders, by the way, some have gotten the divinely they're divinely appointed. And others, of course, develop these skills and talents as they progress. So I just hope, as we organize these communities at the micro level, at the student association level, at the community gathering places, at the mosques and so forth and so on, we think like we are transformational leaders. So that way we can take few punches, we can focus on the big picture. We're not going to let anyone sacrifice. At the end of the day, then unity becomes a reality. And then with unity, of course, the speaker before me explained how important that is and what can be accomplished organizationally and institutionally and then at the community level, and then at the country level, and at the society at large level, and so forth and so on. With that, I stop. And thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Not necessarily questions. And I pray for a lot of comments rather than questions. Yes.
How can you tell that someone has the potential to become a transformational leader? I mean, a leader is never born, but it can be made. Like, how can you tell, and within yourself too, and with others?
Well, for one thing, and this is not just vague compliment, but I want to say everyone who showed up today here, all the youth that showed up today, and all the others that are listening to us, who showed the interest, that's an indication that they have the potential to become. Whether they are going to become or not, we need to test each one's ability by action, as the speaker before me said. Once they start delivering, then you will really see who can deliver and who cannot. And it's a trial and error, as long as we keep in our minds to improve the next time. So long as there is a progress, it doesn't matter how big of a progress it is, you stay focused on that until you develop, you master those skills. And that's how you can win and become transformational leader in the future. Anybody else who has, yes?
I was going to ask you about what's your message today for the youth around the United States or back home or here? What's your message today? What could they do better to accomplish, to be successful?
Simply put, think higher, think bigger, and don't become hostage to the history. Always there is a better day. We can improve always. And as long as we do that, you will see magic taking place. Anybody else? Comments? Yes, and I'll come to you guys. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think that it's become very clear that identifying and developing leaders is really important, and especially for a community like ours that is, I think, still very much in the early stages of building institutions and things like that. And I guess this is more of a comment just to challenge everyone in the room, but especially the older generations in the room to really bring in the youth. And I think you made a great point that those of us who are youth and we're here, it's because we're really interested and we want to do something for our community. And I think something that could be really great is if we created a concrete mentorship program. Like maybe some of those of you in the room who are experienced with community organizing could take aside one of us, really make sure that exchange of contact information is made, those relational meetings we were talking about earlier, and don't just drop that relationship, develop it and really bring us up to rise into those roles. So I guess that's what I would ask everyone in the room to think about, and maybe coming out of this conference so that we have something concrete, that it's not just talk, but that we actually have something we can do when we leave at the end of the weekend.
I'll come back to you.
Thank you very much for the conference. And when I was teaching in Boston Public School, I was telling every single day Somali students and other immigrants to the United States, do you want to be somebody in the future, or do you want to be nobody in the future? You have two choices. Today we see in this room, Engineer Hussein, Saeed, today they are professionals. Yesterday when they come to the United States, they have no enough education, and they were growing up. So we are very happy today. We have PhD from Harvard. PhD from Harvard, a Somali young man. So that's asset for us. So I like the conferences, the meetings, Somali intellectuals, elders, parents, to encourage their children not to lose in United States, because we represent our community back home. Today we see starvation in Somalia. It's very a shame if we don't tell anything to the world we cannot express. We are not blind people. So what we see in the conference is, it tells us the picture which our brother Abukar tell us, how we can lead our community. What's the leadership? Thank you very much.
Yeah, I would also like to add to Camila's request. I think one of the goals of meetings like this is to exchange contact information for networking purposes, also for helping develop support network for the young professionals, the already established bros in our community, and the young ones who are still in school trying to make a life for themselves. So I think that's a very good idea. We need to take that further.
Well, I thank each and every one of you for the comments, and I think I want to revisit the suggestion to establish mentoring program. I don't think we have, I could be corrected, I don't think we established formally, but what's happening right now is with the Somali diaspora youth is there is a listserv that includes, I think, several hundred, 400 or some youth throughout the country, basically. And some are in overseas, in fact. And they're exchanging a lot of ideas. So that's a starting point. But formally, really, to set up a mentoring program is very essential, and I cannot emphasize enough. Maybe this will be an opportunity, a day like tomorrow, there is a session when there will be interactions and that type of thing to really put all the groundwork to make that happen. Huh? Thank you very much. Yes?
A couple things from online.
More than what I want.
Do you have any plans to hold workshops such as these in communities such as Minnesota, where the Somali population is significantly large but yet truly lack transformational need?
Well, I'm put on the spot. I don't know if I can answer that question. I like to say yes immediately, but I don't know if I can, if I'm the only person. Well, somebody should help me here. Well, you heard it. So we're willing to do it if the Minneapolis community or Minnesota can invite us. So there you have it. How do you change that? I think one of the qualities of the transformational leadership that we talked about is self-sacrifice. Remember, we said that the person is not selfish. He does not do things for selfish motives or clan motives or all of these other, personal or community interests, but sees bigger picture than that, right? So in order to change the people's mindset, that individual would have to kind of display or demonstrate with the values that he or she is teaching to others. What that means is that they have to make a lot of sacrifices, yeah? Not for self-interest, not for clan interest, but for the interest of the people at large in a grand scale of things. If they keep doing that, then people will understand and appreciate that they really mean what they're saying. Right now, what we don't have is we have people who can talk the talk, but very little who can walk the walk. Yeah? Until we get that, then you will not really have a transformed society. Because you would have society that looks at the individuals who stand for them and say, okay, so what's the hidden agenda? So when is it going to come out? Today, tomorrow, next week perhaps? How long should I wait before I see what the hidden motive is, until we grow out of that. And that's why the young generation are very important, because they're not, well, I should not generalize. I can't even say about them in their totality, but in most cases, they're not hostage to history, okay? So they're most likely group of people to emerge out of that. Even though people have families, which is the first institution, right? The first institution is a family. And family is the one that builds our values in most cases, right? Before we are exposed to the others. So in some cases, if the family is telling us certain things, don't trust anybody, so-and-so is trying to organize, okay, who's paying for that? How much money are they earning based on in doing this? And all of these cynicism, the only way to transcend that would be to demonstrate that you mean business. And the way you're going to do it is self-sacrificing, that you have to come out, you as an individual transformational leader, empty-handed. That's the only way that people are going to buy. And it would be very, very difficult for societies like us, where we are at this stage of division and so forth and so on.
So I have a question, but it also has like a statement with it. We all came from Somalia to come here for a fresh start and like to build a better future, but I don't understand how we're gonna become a community, a tight-knit community at that, who supports each other if we can't get past we're from different tribes. But we're all Somalian people, so how are we gonna start becoming a community if some people still hold that difference and still have that animosity towards each other?
Good job, Edward.
Very good question. Well, first of all, there's nothing wrong to being from another tribe. That's not the issue. The issue is always if a person is seeing the other tribe is somewhat inferior to him or her, okay? Or the other tribe has less right to justice than he. Good for you, and that's why we're counting on people like you. Yeah, people that don't have any concept of that tribalism, if you will, So, that's where the problem is. When people think that others don't have the rights to access, rights to grievance, rights to, many other things that they would make sure that their clan is entitled to, okay? That's where the problem is. But to be from another clan, that's a part of the identity. There's nothing wrong with that. Everybody's from somewhere. Yeah. And rebuilding that common denominator is very important. And I think this kind of opportunity, where people from different cities who are roughly around the same age and who can really interact with people who are more experienced than them and take it, and their counsel, if you will, so they would not make the same mistakes that others have made, is a good opportunity, I think. That's how we can emerge out of it. I'm sorry? Yeah. But that's something people are not getting over. Yeah. And that's what we need to plant now. And that's what we need to have the patience in developing, In due course, you will see people emerging out of that sense of ignorance, if you will. Yes? Oh, there's an online question.
Okay. How can the youth get their saying and message across?
No, you hang on. I'm sorry, go ahead.
How can the youth get their sayings and message across? Because in reality, most of the youth, or most of us youth, don't get listened to, and our voices are not heard, and they downgrade us.
Wow. Very good question. Youth involvement is very, very essential, very critical. That's why we are here, by the way, to get everyone involved. But as a society, I think over the years, and I don't know when, we failed to appreciate the contribution of our youth. We did. And this is what we're trying to do, is to revive that now. Islamically, though, when you look at the Islamic history, the involvement of youth is very essential. You know, you will find that throughout the development of Islam, the three major missions that the Prophet ﷺ has sent were led by three different youth. The oldest was 21 years of age, who led the first migration from Mecca, people who were really oppressed in Mecca, and migrated to Abyssinia of the days, current day Ethiopia. You know. It was led by a 21-year-old. So Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu, one of the most praised Muslim leaders, in his council, he had a 13-year-old boy who was advising him. Here is the most praised leader after the Prophet ﷺ in Islam. And he had a 13-year-old boy, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, who was advising him, one of his advisors. And people were getting offended, saying, we have kids that are much older than this 13-year-old. What does he know that we don't know? But the 13-year-old had a profound knowledge of his religion at the time. And he was a deep thinker, you know. So in other words, age is irrelevant. You know, it's not, leadership is not youth exclusive, nor is it elderly exclusive. But traditionally, we became societies that always say, when there is a problem, let's call the elders, with all my respect to my elders. But wisdom is not exclusive to age, is what I'm trying to say. Knowledge is not exclusive to age. You know, you have to have all of those people who have the capacity, regardless of their age, the old, the young, the in-between. You know, as long as everybody participates in that process, then there is a good chance that we find a lot of answers. Thank you.
My name is Nancy Murray. I'm from the American Civil Liberties Union, which is an organization that basically protects people's rights in this country, upholds your constitutional rights. And I want to make sure, in addition to the need for mentorship, that you use the services of organizations like ours to find out what your rights are. I mean, we would be happy to come and do a training or anything you need. I put some materials out on the table about what to do if you're stopped by the police, what to do if you're visited by the FBI. It's really essential to have this information. But I just want to end by saying, you know, in addition to youth all around the world leading struggles, here in the United States, movements have been led by young people. We think of Dr. Martin Luther King. He was quite young when he led the civil rights movement. But in fact, the civil rights movement, the foot soldiers were 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, the youth in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. And they were the ones who really brought about fundamental change. So I think it is so important that you're here and keep up doing what you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much. One more? Okay. And there's one more, okay.
One more question. Online question.
One more online question. Okay, go ahead.
What kind of leaders do Somalis in Somalia need today?
Leaders who are honest, leaders who would understand that it is a public trust and they have to guard it, and then they will be held one day accountable, if not in this world, in the hereafter. Leadership who would not go to sleep knowing that there are a lot of wrongs that are happening in their societies. Abuses of all kinds. Whether it is a person who does not have anything to eat. The same way, the model that we mentioned earlier, and we said Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anhu, we mentioned that. His form of leadership was an amazing. Maybe if we don't have today people who can lead in that fashion, they can learn from that. They can aspire to become leaders like that. Leaders who would be roaming around the streets in the middle of the night. In the middle of the night, just making sure that there is no hungry stomach there. Or somebody who's homeless. And he would be walking the streets with his best friend at the time, the equivalent of the richest man. You know, imagine Obama and Gates walking the streets, the central city USA, trying to find out who is hungry and who is homeless, you know, and trying to build everything. That's what they were doing. Now that's a standard way above all of us in most cases, but that's an inspiration. That's, if we're thinking in that fashion and saying, what am I doing? What kind of service am I providing for people? Then we can always improve. And I think Somalia needs that kind of leadership today. And may God help us.
I think
Okay, go ahead.
I think the older Somali generation should practice what they preach because they tell us to do one thing, but then they do like the complete opposite. So it's like they tell us that we're all one community, but in reality, there's 3 different communities that like does not get along at all. So it's like, where do we stand as a community?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sadly, that happens in a lot of different communities, by the way, not exclusive to yours only. But I think there's enough of the leadership of the community present in here that they can take that kind of challenge and talk about some of the differences that they have and how to mend fences and how to build bridges of understanding and all of that. And again, I'll turn it to the youth. You guys can take the leadership on that. At least call those kind of meetings when people can talk about their differences and the duties, the responsibilities that they neglect while they're focusing negatively on one another. You know. So that concludes everything. Jazakumullah khair.